Welcome to Oral Communication Quarter 1, Week 4, Various Strategies to Avoid Communication Breakdown. I am Mr. Nelprin Pisambalod and I am your teacher for this course. What's in? In Lesson 1, you have learned the concept of communication breakdown and its causes. Now you will understand how this breakdown of communication can be avoided. Let us proceed to this activity. Directions. List down 2 to 3 situations based on what I can do activity in lesson 1 in which communication breakdowns were experienced at home, school, and community. Then suggest one best strategy to avoid that communication breakdown. Let's take a look on the given example. Breakdown. The DOST scholar uses technical words in explaining his research to the barangay secretariats, which resulted to confusion among them. Strategy. The DOST scholar should use simple and specific words about his research to the barangay secretariats so they would finally understand his message. So, experiences of communication breakdown under column 1, then strategies to avoid communication breakdown. So, in the given example, the breakdown is when the DOST scholar was not understood by the attendees of that research seminar in the barangay. Now, under the strategies to avoid communication, the suggested one is for the DOST scholar not to use highfalutin words or technical terms in the seminar, wherein he should be or she should just use simple and specific words. So the communication barrier there will be the linguistic barrier. Okay? Then another example of it, just like in the videos made by you, you have the breakdown. Someone called, but the thing there, the person is in the middle of the market. So the strategies to avoid communication breakdown for that person to go to a quiet place or a less crowded area so that he can be able to understand whatever will be said by the caller. Okay? So let's proceed. School. In the school, the communication breakdown, it can be what? In terms of a teacher in science explaining lessons using their highfalutin or indeed terms that are high sounding wherein students can no longer understand those. So what will be the teacher will be doing? He or she needs to use simple or basic terms so that the lesson will be understood. Okay? So in the community, a good example of it would be what? A good example of it would be having their announcements coming from the barangay, wherein the announcement should be again should be using simple and specific words and not high sounding ones. Okay, let's go on. What's new? The process of communication does not mention and explain about the barriers or problems that may be encountered in a communication transaction. They are simply implied or understood in the process. However, after understanding the concept of communication breakdown and its causes, we may realize that failure in communication may be avoided through certain strategies that we could adapt. So what's the meaning of this slide is that when we studied what's communication all about, it is not being said there that we will encounter problems leading to misunderstanding. But as we go on studying lesson 3, the communication breakdowns, we found out that it is possible for communication not to be that effective whenever a communication barrier is experienced between the speaker and the receiver of the message. So, whenever the message, the opinions, the ideas, or the thoughts are not delivered and understood clearly by the receiver, because of a certain barrier, then you have the communication breakdown. So what is being said here is that although we have these so-called communication barriers leading to communication breakdowns, also we also have these so-called certain strategies that we can use to avoid this so-called communication breakdown. And that's what we are going to study for this week's lesson. Okay? The biggest question for this week's lesson is how can we avoid communication breakdown? So let us study Sir Ronnie Peterson's 5 ways to avoid communication breakdown. So, according to him, communication breakdown can cause issues or problems at home, school, and community. There are so many barriers to communication, like physiological, psychological, cultural, and linguistics. Sometimes, some communication barriers are too difficult to solve, and this will lead to slowing the progress and efficiency. So those are according to Sir Ronnie Peterson's. So communication breakdown can cause issues or problems at home. Of course, it's given that whenever we have communication breakdown, then the message is not clearly understood by the by the receiver. So therefore, whatever the instructions given or whatever are the things being asked for by the speaker will not be accomplished by the receiver because he or she was not able to understand fully the message given. Okay, so the good thing here is that whenever we know that we have the so-called physiological, psychological, cultural, and linguistics barriers, then we will be trying our very best to avoid committing any of those or to be indulged on any of those so that communication breakdown will not take place. And if it doesn't take place, then we're able to avoid such or that so-called communication breakdown. Okay, then accordingly also sometimes some communication barriers are too difficult to solve, and this will lead to slowing the progress and efficiency. A good example of it is what in a workplace, whenever you are being given a task to be accomplished, then you're not able to understand the instructions given by the person who gave the task, then you are what slowing the progress or the production in that company or in that workplace of yours, is it? Okay, so now let's have the possible strategies to avoid communication breakdown. Let us have the first strategy under 5 ways of avoiding communication breakdown according to Sir Ronnie Peterson's. So the first in the list is the have clarity of thought before speaking. So look at the image. Yes, that colorful one. So what can you see there? You have your index cards in different shades, in different colors. So why did I choose to have that image there? So that you, being a speaker, will be reminded that before speaking, if you cannot if you cannot organize your thoughts in your mind, then you can always take a pencil, a pen, or a paper, then jot down or write down your ideas first before speaking. It's kind of the same with joining a debate, wherein before doing so, you organize your ideas or your thoughts so that when it is your time to speak, then you will be that good speaking in front of your opponents. Okay? So let's have the definition of have clarity of thought before speaking. So arrange your thoughts before verbalizing them. This can help you communicate much more clearly and succinctly. It is a better idea to say something like, I've got a few ideas here. Let me go through them one at a time. We can treat each one on its own merit. Okay? So I already explained it, the have clarity of thought before speaking. It's always good doing it that way so that whenever you speak, then you will be sounding that intelligent in front of your listeners. And they will not question whatever you are saying because you do sound certain with your thoughts because you are able to organize them, leading to a clear expression of thoughts. Okay, so that's the first strategy. Let's have the second strategy suggested by Sir Petersons. We have the learn to listen. Look at the image. You have there a man who's trying his very best to listen to someone who's speaking. So learn to listen. As simple as it sounds, you will be surprised how many people out there don't know how to listen well. So maybe you have experienced it wherein you have something to say, but you cannot go on with what you are about to deliver because the person whom you're talking to doesn't want you to speak, but instead would like to go on speaking also without trying his or her best to listen on you, is it? Did you experience that? Okay, so whenever that happens, you as the person who's about to say something and is not being listened to, then you are losing your enthusiasm on speaking with that person, is it? Okay. So another thing here, not understanding those who you are trying to communicate with will to communicate with will lead to a conversation fraught with misunderstandings. Don't be afraid to ask them to repeat or explain further in polite manner once you don't understand the point. So even though you are listening that well to someone who's speaking, then there are times also that you cannot understand what is being said. And it's okay if you will be asking the person who's speaking to please repeat again whatever he or she said. There's nothing wrong on doing so. It only shows that you are truly listening, and there's only there a detail that you were not able to understand though you listened. Okay? So that's the good thing whenever you know how to listen. You can really assess whether you're able to understand everything that was said or not. Okay? So that's the second strategy on avoiding communication breakdown. We are now on the third strategy to avoid communication breakdown. So look at the image. You have the eye contact. So in communication, it's very important that you look straight to the eyes of the person whom you're talking to because doing so communicates sincerity, that you are sincere on whatever you are saying. So that image explains the third strategy on avoiding communication breakdown, which is take care of your body language and tone. So the body language has something to do with your gestures, and the tone there is what? Is how you take the communication. Are you in favor of it or not? Wherein you are not showing negativities that you're not interested with whatever the person whom you're talking to is saying. Okay, so you should take care of that so that the enthusiasm in the conversation, particularly of the person whom you're talking to, will not be lost. Okay? So, what does it mean? Keep your emotions in check. Try to maintain eye contact and adapt a relaxed tone when conversing with others. Okay? So, the good example of this relaxed tone will be the Ilonggos, wherein even though they are angry, they do still sound sweet to the people whom they're talking to. So, of course, na it's always good that in communication, although you're becoming pessimistic already or negative already with the topic you're talking to, but still, you're trying your very best to listen to that person and see the beauty on whatever being said by that person by what? By having their a relaxed tone as you go on communicating with that person. Okay? So always get hold on your emotions whenever you are in a communication or conversation so that you can avoid communication breakdown because once your emotion gets in you, then you will be losing the enthusiasm talking to that person. Okay? So do not let the emotion of yours rule over you. Okay? So let's proceed. Stare at the image. You have there a girl who seems so confident, so assured of herself as she talks in front of people. But the question there is that is she really confident enough? Maybe. For she already what? Rehearsed whatever she's saying by that time. Is it? Okay, so that's strategy number four. Build up your confidence by asking for feedback and observing others. So we can make ourselves that good in terms of communication with people as we practice, 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 and practice. So never forget to do that. Or also, by just listening or looking at people as they talk with one another, we can gain something from it so that the next time we are the ones who will be in that situation, then we know how to carry ourselves in front of these people whom we are going to talk to because we're able to see the same situation or we're able to listen to the same topics and we know what to say for we heard about those already. Okay? So, focus on improving your skills by practicing in front of those who you may feel more comfortable with. You can also ask those who advise you value to give you feedback and critique your communication style after a discussion. That's why it's always good to have your circle of friends and with these people whom you truly trust that they will not let you down. You can always practice your communication skills. And for example, you have the representation to be made, you can always deliver it first in front of them and ask them whether you're good enough or not. Okay, that's one of the ways on how you can develop or build your confidence. You always practice before the day of the delivery or presentation of whatever that presentation will be. Okay, so you can always ask for feedback and do not feel so negative about the feedback you are hearing from people. Always have in mind that these are positive feedbacks that will make you the better version of yourself in terms of communication. So that's number four, build up your confidence by asking for feedback and observing others. We are now on the last strategy on how we can avoid communication breakdown. So hopefully, as you listen to the first four strategies, then by now you have ideas on how you can successfully communicate with people around you without experiencing communication breakdown because you are applying or you are about to apply these strategies on avoiding such. So let's have the last one. Communicate face to face on the important issues. So look at the picture. You have a person who seems to be busy demonstrating something to his friends, to his fellow member. Yes, and these people, they are also looking at him at the same time on whatever he is demonstrating. That's a good example of communicating face to face with important issues. And the more you will be effective on explaining your side, as you demonstrate it to your friends or to the people who are listening to you. So what's the definition of it? Having that face-to-face dialogue means you can convey your point more clearly with your body language as well as your tone of voice. So it's what? It's a good thing or it's always a good practice that as you talk to people you are particular with what you are pointing to them and you are clear on demonstrating or speaking about that idea of yours as what we talked about earlier. Now that body gesture that you must have the eye contact with the people whom you're talking to because it communicates sincerity on whatever you are saying. What more if you will be accompanying it with the body language, the tone and the voice of yours, wherein whenever you have an important thing to be told to them, then you will be what? Making your voice that loud enough so that you can emphasize that this is the important point of what I am saying. Okay? And the tone. Whenever you are trying to convince them, then you speak in the manner that you are trying to persuade them. Not what? Not interrogating them. You are not questioning them, but instead you are what? You are trying your very best to please them. Okay? That's a good example of the so-called tone. Then another definition of it, it can also help to clear up any misunderstandings or distortion of the message that could occur through other mediums. So the good thing about communicating face to face on the important issues is that you can always clear things to your friends or to the people whom you are conversing with because you are there. You are really wanting yourself to be present so that you can clear details about that issue you are associated with. Okay? So that's the last strategy on avoiding communication breakdown. Communicate face to face on the important issues. Though we are armored already with the five ways or strategies on avoiding communication breakdown, let us remember this. Becoming a strong and effective communicator takes time and practice. Over time, using these strategies can lead to better communication in your personal relationships and more productive workplace environments as well. So, you look at that image there. You have there a girl who is really composed and really what having the oozing confidence as she talks in front of people. Even her voice is really what that good, and even the manner of dressing. So do not forget it. The manner of dressing is part of being an effective communicator, wherein you dress properly based on the occasion you are invited with or you are in. Okay? So do not forget that for you to become a very good interlocutor, communicator, then you have to keep on practicing speaking with people. Now, so if it's not now, maybe the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year, that you will be that good in terms of communicating with people. So it takes time and practice. And as you gain this confidence in communicating with people, then definitely the more you will improve yourself in terms of having relationship with people around you and being that productive in your environment or in your workplace. Okay, so do not ever forget it. So let's continue. After we discuss the 5 strategies on avoiding communication breakdown, according to Sir Ronnie Peterson's, now let us answer the following questions based on the said article. So the questions are: what are the barriers to communication mentioned from the articles? How can communication breakdown be avoided? Number three, in your opinion, which is the easiest and most difficult way to avoid communication breakdown? And lastly, do you think effective communication avoid communication breakdown? Why or why not? Do you agree that becoming a strong and effective communicator takes time and practice? Why or why not? So you are going to deal with those questions in your Google Classroom. As you look for the Google Form link, you write your answers there. So let us proceed. What is it? A smooth and successful communication transaction may result if we follow some particular strategies to deliver our message. Communication becomes successful if and only if our communication goal is achieved. That is, an understanding is reached and a relationship is built or maintained. So, after we studied the 5 strategies on avoiding communication breakdown, we are about to study also a set of strategies that will help us to become more successful on communicating with others. So let's have it. Here are some strategies to avoid communication breakdown. The first in the list is keep focused. So as you can see in the image, you have there a man who's wearing a suit. Then he's what? He's into archery and he's trying to target the bull's eye. Na the very center of that circle there. So that illustrates that he has the focus on whatever he wants to achieve. So in communication, keeping focus is necessary. One way of being focused is to put up in mind the purpose communication. As a speaker, identify your purpose for speaking, and as a listener, find the speaker's purpose through his or her verbal and nonverbal cues. So, keeping focus in communication is not just in the shoe, or it's not just the responsibility of the speaker alone that he should be able to deliver his goal or his target why he is in that communication. Na it's not just a matter of delivering his purpose to the receiver or to the listener, but also it's the responsibility of the receiver or listener that he should be or she should be able to get the purpose of the speaker. Why is the speaker talking to him or her? Now, and he can or she can identify it by paying attention to the verbal and nonverbal cues given or executed by the speaker. So again, you must have the focus whenever you communicate with people. Another strategy is for the person to speak intelligibly. So look at that image. You have there a person who seems to be that confident, sharing or presenting whatever presentation he has. And the manner he stands, he seems to be very knowledgeable. So this strategy to speak intelligibly is necessary in terms of communication. So what does it mean? Speaking intelligibly or clearly means using the appropriate speaking volume, pitch rate, proper enunciation, stress, and acceptable pronunciation. We speak in order to be understood. So speaking intelligibly requires a person to to speak with all the appropriate means in terms of communicating with people. So, as you do so, then definitely you will be certainly understood by your listeners or by the receivers of the message that you would like them to hear from you. So, again, that's the second strategy when it comes to speaking. You should speak intelligibly. Another strategy for us to use on avoiding communication breakdown is the listen with your ears and eyes. So if you can remember, under Sir Ronnie's Peterson's strategies to avoid communication breakdown, we have there the learn to listen. So this is kind of similar with it. So listen with your ears and eyes. Look at the image. You have there a person who seems to be extending his ears and even putting his hand on it so that he can listen clearly to whatever the message is being given to him. Also, as you can notice, the eyes also is staring. He's trying his best also to look at the person, whatever he is demonstrating or doing, so that the more he can understand the message being delivered by that person. So that's an example of listening with your ears and eyes. So what's the meaning of it? Pay attention to verbal and nonverbal message. Effective communication depends on what people say and how they say it. So let's always put that in mind. For us to avoid communication breakdown, we should give focus, attention to whatever is being said by a person. And not only to the verbal words we should listen, but also to the nonverbal gestures of that person. Because by doing so, the more we can understand whatever message is meant by that person. That's why we should listen with our ears and eyes. Because there are instances that people are finding it difficult to express themselves or their idea verbally. That's why they make use of nonverbal gestures to demonstrate the idea. And if you are paying attention to it, even though you're having difficulty listening to the idea that that person would like to convey, but looking at the gestures, then still there will be no chance for communication breakdown because still uh, you can relate to whatever that speaker would like to say. And that is by listening with your eyes and not just with your ears. Okay? That's the strategy. That's another strategy for us to avoid communication breakdown. Another strategy to avoid communication breakdown is by minimizing distractions. So maybe you feel comfortable by now as you look at that picture. You have there a sofa, yes, and a one-seater sofa and a table with a mug of coffee. So what does it imply? That there will be better communication if if a speaker and listener or receiver are going to confine themselves in a conducive place for communication, wherein you seclude yourselves from a crowded area and go to a private place or to a place where you can really communicate with each other without barrier that will interrupt your communication, your conversation. Okay? So whenever we say minimize distractions, you look for a place where you can minimize distractions or noise like closed area, empty room, or quiet places. Lessening the cost for confusion means giving more room to focus and concentrate. Of course, since we know that we have the presence of physical barrier or the so-called external noises, then it would be better that we decide for the place where we will have the conversation so that those two will not have the chance to step in and stop communication or serve as distraction to communication. And by doing so, then there will be no communication breakdown. That's why this is one of the strategies on stopping or limiting or not giving space for communication breakdown. Okay? So again, minimize distractions. Have you ever experienced talking to someone, then you stop listening that much to that person because you're having in mind that you knew already whatever that person would like to say to you? Have you encountered that? If so, that's the thing that you should avoid when it comes to communicating with people. Because that's the last strategy that you must have in mind for communication breakdown, not to step in. The so-called do not jump to conclusions. That's why you have there the image of a person who's trying to put everything in his mind based from whatever he listens to or he heard rather from that speaker. Okay, you should be like that. You should be accommodating to whatever ideas that the person whom you're talking to is sharing to you. And if you are that kind of person, then you are not jumping to conclusions. Okay, so what does it mean? Before you give your comments and judgment, be sure that you have listened attentively to the speaker. Conclusions should be drawn after a thorough analysis of point given or information received. So always practice it that way, that you listen attentively or intently to a person who's speaking before you give your reply or your feedback. And do not jump to conclusions wherein the person is just about to start sharing whatever he or she wants to say, then your mind is already closed and you do not want to listen anymore because you're thinking that you know already where is that conversation heading to. So it should not be like that, okay? So if you will be practicing it that way, then communication breakdown will not step in. So again, do not jump to conclusions. I do hope that by now you are aware of so many strategies on how to avoid communication breakdown. But for you to be fully equipped on making yourself that good in communication and avoiding communication breakdown, I'll share to you the tips given by Broom, Catlip, and Center in 2012, where they were able to list the so-called seven C's of effective communication in their book, Effective Public Relations. Accordingly, the seven C's of communication are completeness, conciseness, consideration, concreteness, courtesy, clearness, and correctness. As you become observant of these in your conversation, the more you can avoid communication breakdown. So let's have them one at a time. Let's have the first C in the seven C's of communication. We have completeness. As you can see in the image, you have there the inverted pyramid in writing. So why did I choose that image, the inverted pyramid in writing news stories and other articles? Because the inverted pyramid shows the complete details that an article must have. Okay, so completeness. So as you can see at the first part of it, you have the already the needed information. Because in communication, na you should be able to give the needed information. You should be able to deliver your purpose why you are in that conversation with that person. So what is completeness? It is important to whole communication process. The speaker should include everything that the receiver needs to hear, respond, react, or evaluate properly. He or she should be able to convey all pertinent details so listener or audience will be able to grasp the intended message. So again, that's the reason why I chose the inverted pyramid image in writing because that one includes all the pertinent details that an article must have. So the same thing in conversation as a speaker, you should always have in mind that you should be complete with the details that you need to say to that listener or receiver of your message so that there will be completeness and your listener will not be left questioning regarding what's the purpose, why did the two of you talk. So again, you call that completeness. Have you ever experienced being confused unsure, lost, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, and bewildered with the information you heard from the speaker or from someone whom you listen to. If you encountered such, then definitely you haven't encountered this so-called conciseness. So this is the second tip or the so-called second C of the seven C's in communication, conciseness. Okay? So those things that I enumerated are the other way around or the opposite of the so-called conciseness. So what is conciseness? The message should be direct or straight to the point and should be expressed in the least possible number of words. Irrelevant information should not be included. So for you to be concise in communicating with people and for communication breakdown not to step in, avoid being ambiguous or avoid the so-called ambiguity when it comes to talking or putting your ideas into words. Just mention there the necessary words or just be straight to the point. It's kind of the same with what? Answering in a Q&A portion of a beauty pageant wherein you only have 30 seconds to express yourselves regarding the given question. So if you will be that ambiguous, definitely you cannot communicate your purpose or your idea regarding the given question if you will be too wordy with your thoughts. So you should be concise. So that is what you call conciseness, wherein your listeners or the receivers of your message will not be feeling lost, confused, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, and bewildered with your message. Okay? So conciseness is the second C in the seven C's of communication. If you can still remember, cultural barrier is one of the barriers in communication. And how are we going to avoid or to make ourselves that good in communication considering cultural barriers? It's a matter of being respectful of the culture, beliefs, traditions of other people. So look at the image. You have their what? Well, you have their four persons, yes, in different colors, but still they are what? Hand in hand, they are hand in hand and seems to be united because they are what? They are trying their very best to understand one another. And if in communication you are such, you are trying your very best to understand the person whom you're talking to, then you have this third C of the seven C's in communication. You call it consideration. So what is consideration? In order to be effective, the speaker should give high regard and courtesy to audience's background information such as his or her culture, education, religion, status, mood, feelings, and needs. This will result in building rapport or connection with the audience. So consideration for communication breakdown, not to step in, you should be considerate on whom these people you're talking to. What are their background, who they are, what do they know? Okay, it's kind of the same with what whenever I and my friends are having get together and we have there a friend who's not in the teaching field, then as much as possible we avoid talking about topics that are not related. We avoid talking topics that are related to education for our other friend not to feel awkward or out of place. So you call that consideration, okay? So why talk about this thing about education and everything wherein we have there a friend who cannot relate at all because he or she is not in the field of teaching. So as we go on talking about anything, everything that everybody can relate to, then you have their consideration. Okay. So the other examples of consideration, of course, has something to do with religion, culture, beliefs, tradition. So again, let us always make ourselves aware of those so that we can always adjust the level of communicating with these people, or at least we can always change topics wherein everybody can participate. Okay, so again, you call it consideration. Maybe some of you, when you were in junior high school, experienced presenting your thesis or research studies to your subject teachers, to your research teachers, and for you to be that effective on doing so, you made use of presentations, not just the PowerPoint presentation, images of your research, but most especially the so-called outputs or products of your research. And if you had done it that way, then certainly I do believe that the more your research teachers appreciated your work, for you were able to present concrete examples of your study or product of your study. And if you had done it that way, then you already experienced this so-called concreteness or the fourth C in the seven C's of communication. So what is concreteness? Effective communication is backed up by facts, figures, and real-life examples or situations. This will make the receiver to understand the message better. So it's kind of the same in what? In a communication between a person, between two persons, wherein for that person to be sounding reliable, then he or she should present real, real life scenario and not just the imaginative ones. Okay, so you have to be concrete on presenting your examples. If you can back up your your ideas with statistics, with figures, and real life scenario, then much better. For it makes the receiver or the listener understand fully whatever you are trying to explain. It's kind of the same with what? With the image that I have there. You have there a presenter and she has their examples of whatsoever product or whatsoever topic she's sharing. Okay? So you call it concreteness. We are now on the fifth C of the seven C's in communication, and it's called courtesy. Courtesy is deeper in meaning than consideration. So, how is that so? Whenever we say courtesy, the speaker can show respect to his or her receivers through understanding their culture, values, and beliefs. The speaker can show respect to the listeners by demonstrating an understanding of their beliefs, values, and culture. This implies good choice of words and language and a consideration of the audience perspectives and feelings on the part of the sender. Showing courtesy helps create a positive vibe with the audience. This implies good choice of words and language on the part of the sender and consideration of audience perspectives. So look at the image. In consideration, I made use there of an image of four person holding their hands together and standing as one. But by this time, under courtesy, I have here an image showing five persons talking with one another and seems to be entertained by each other, though the colors are different. So why it became possible for them to talk in that way? Because they practice the so-called courtesy. Okay, the so-called courtesy, the respect for one another, relenting to their culture, values, and beliefs. It's kind of the same with what talking about one's religion. Okay, for example, the topic that they are talking about is about their religion, then maybe no, maybe one of them should not mention the so-called dinuguan as his or her favorite food. For one will be offended, especially if a member of that one prominent religions in our country, is it? Because they don't eat dinuguan. So it's a matter of choice of words whenever communicating with people. So that's by doing so, you are showing the so-called courtesy. You're being courteous enough to their beliefs, to their culture, values, and whatsoever that might make them feel bad communicating with you once you're not particular with it. Okay? So again, practicing the so-called courtesy in communication, one of the seven C's in communication, then surely you can avoid communication breakdown. Okay, let's proceed. In one of the strategies that we talked earlier, we already tackled the so-called keep focus. So keep focus is kind of similar with having in mind your purpose, why you are talking or why you are speaking in front of people. So what is your purpose? Why are you standing in front of these people? What is your intention? What do you need to tell them? Okay, so once you make yourself aware of this, or you reminded yourself of this regarding your focus, regarding your purpose, why you are talking to that person, or why you are standing in front of those people, then you are already practicing the sixth C of the seven C's of communication, and it's called clearness. So what is clearness? It implies the use of simple and specific words to express ideas. When the speaker focuses on specific ideas, it will not confuse the audience. Okay? So we already talked about ambiguity and being ambiguous earlier. So it's kind of the same. When it comes to speaking, communicating with people, then we should always be specific on what ideas we would like to share to them. Okay? And for us to be understood easily by people around us, then let's make use also of specific words that will best convey the ideas that we would like to share to them. Okay? So let us avoid confusing our audience. Let us talk straight to the point, and let us not make ourselves that ambiguous so that there will be clearness whenever we talk to people. So look at the image there. You have there a person who's delivering his speech in front of people, but it seems that his ideas are mixed, that he doesn't know which one to tell to the listeners. So that one doesn't show clearness. But if the image shows to us that he has only their few words, few sentences, then we can say that he has the clearness there. Okay? But since it's like that, it seems to be cluttered, then we're not going to have this clearness or this sixth C of the seven C's of communication. Okay? So let's continue. Let's have the last one. We are now on the last C in the seventh C's of communication, and it is called correctness. Look at the image there. You have the police badge. So, what's indicated on it? To serve and correct grammar. Police. Okay, we're talking about grammar. Why is that so? Because correctness has something to do with avoiding mistakes in grammar. Because it helps to boost the credibility and effectiveness of the message. And at the same time, it eliminates negative impact on the audience. So, meaning to say, in the communication process, or as you go on communicating with people, see to it that you are particular with your grammar. Because being so makes your listeners believe on whatever you are saying, because you do sound reliable. For even in simple grammar errors, you are what? You are not committing such, okay? And if you're not committing such, then the more you sound convincing, because what? You're able to study those, you're able to know those, meaning to say you're kind of reliable on whatever you are saying. So it's good that, of course, noticing your grammar, your wordings as you go on communicating with people, then you are in the right track, okay? Because it's kind of, communication breakdown steps in whenever, for example, whenever I am in a conversation, then I'm talking to someone, then that person uh, said a certain sentence, then in the sentence there's so many flaws in grammar, then I lost enthusiasm listening to that person, because I'm thinking that why should I listen to him wherein I am much better, or I am better than that person? Is it? So always practice correct grammar, or that so-called correctness, not just in your grammar, but even in the details in your sentences, or in the ideas that you are presenting, for you to eliminate the so-called negative impact on the audience minds. Okay? So again, have the correctness. After studying the seven C's of effective communication by Broom, Catlip, and Center, let us remember this. Breakdowns in communication may arise because of several factors, but these factors may be avoided if we follow strategies put forward by experts in the field. Communication is a transaction that we do every day. By following the seven C's of communication espoused by Broom, Catlip, and Center 2012, we may achieve understanding and communicating with others and avoid confusion and misinterpretations. So, meaning to say, let us not just put them in mind, but let's put them into practice. Whatever we have learned from Broom, Catlip, and Center, as well as whatever you have learned from the strategies presented before the seven C's of effective communication. Okay? So let us always put them or apply them in our communication with others. Also, avoiding communication breakdown helps you to be an effective speaker. Okay? So if you want to become an effective speaker in the coming days, then you must always apprehend that there might be communication breakdowns along the way or as you go on communicating with people. So meaning to say, the more you should be conscious on the situation that you are in. That's why oral communication in context, wherein you always know what to do. You always know if there's a need for you to apply this strategy that you have learned so that communication breakdown will not step in. Okay? Okay. So for you to be that really good when it comes to communication and avoiding communication breakdown, we do still have here some strategies that you must learn to avoid, again, the so-called communication breakdown. We do have here helpful expressions to avoid communication breakdown. So as you can see, we have here a table divided into two columns. Under the first column, we have strategies to avoid communication breakdown. And in the second column, we have helpful expressions. So whenever you are in a situation wherein you need time for you to think or for you to be given enough time to think, you use the following expressions. Really? Um, uh-huh. Anyway, tell me more. Okay? So you make use of those expressions whenever you need or you need to gain time for you to think so that communication will continue. Now, wherein actually you make use of those expressions so that you'll be given the time there for you to think on what you are going to say after hearing the idea of that person whom you're talking to. Okay? So again, you have there the really, uh-huh. Anyway, tell me more. But actually, again, you are just buying time for you to come up with a statement or for you to proceed with whatever you want to say or to give your feedback after hearing from someone. Okay? Next is whenever you are about to give positive remarks or comments, you say the following expressions. Sounds good. I see what you mean. Okay, so again, when giving positive remarks or comments, you may use the following expressions. Sounds good. I see what you mean. Okay, and what if you would like the speaker to repeat whatever he or she said because you're not able to understand it, or you're again buying time now for you to organize your thoughts. So what are you going to say? You have the following expressions. Can you please repeat what you've said? Can you please repeat what you said? What did you say again? What did you mean when you say that? What did you mean when you say that? Of course, whenever you ask for repetition, then you should be sounding what? You should be sounding pleasant. What do I mean there? You should not be sounding arrogant. Okay, like the expression. What did you mean again? What did you mean when you say that? What did you mean when you say that? Okay, as if there's what? There's the endearment, okay? So do not sound too arrogant, nah? Because again, you're asking for repetition. That's why, can you please repeat what you've said? Or what did you say again? Okay, so whenever you're asking for repetition. Then we have here on checking understanding. So how are we going to, what are the helpful expressions whenever you are checking for understanding? So are you saying that? So what is your understanding of this? Okay, so you make use of those two expressions whenever you are checking for understanding. So are you saying that? or so. What is your understanding of this? Okay, so those are helpful expressions to avoid communication breakdown. Again, you make use of them so that you can buy time as you organize your thoughts or as before you give your feedback, because you are still processing the details or the message given to you. Okay, or you are trying to patch the communication so that it will continue, it will go on. That's why you make use of those expressions under for repetition and checking up understanding. Okay, so those are helpful expressions on avoiding communication breakdown. After listening to those lectures, now it's high time to find out if you're able to absorb from our discussion. So let's have the what's more activity one. Directions match column A with the best answer in column B. So you write your answer on the space provided, or you can just say it aloud after I finish reading each sentence and uh, coming up with answer for each. Okay? So let's have column A, number one. It refers to the use of simple and precise words. What is being referred to? That is what? Letter B. B is specific. Yes, it refers to the use of simple and precise words. It's letter B. B is specific. The number two, the speaker should identify his her purpose for speaking. So what's the correct answer under column B? We have letter A. Keep focus. So whenever the speaker needs to identify his or her purpose for speaking, then you are referring to the so-called keep focus. Number three, we have she must pay attention to the verbal and nonverbal cues. She must pay attention to the verbal and nonverbal cues. It's letter E. Listen with your ears and eyes. Okay, because as you listen with your ears and eyes, you can give attention to the verbal and nonverbal gestures of the speaker. The number four, he or she must find closed areas or quiet place to avoid communication breakdown. That's place, Place. Okay? So the correct answer is letter what? F. Minimize distraction. So that's one examples of minimizing distraction, looking for a quiet place. Then last one, we have she must have an appropriate speaking volume, speech rate, and acceptable enunciation. That is letter D. You should speak intelligibly, or it's under speaking intelligibly. So those are the answers for what's more activity one. Now let us apply your learning under the seven C's of effective communication. So let's have activity two, directions. Identify what seven C's to effective communication is being described. You write your answer on the space provided, but again, you just mention it aloud after I finish reading each sentence or each question. So number one, it helps to increase the credibility of the speaker and reduce negative impact to the audience. Yes, the correct answer is correctness. So we should always be correct with our grammar or with the details that we are saying so that the audience will have positive remarks about us. Number two, we have it conveys all pertinent details so listener or audience will be able to grasp the intended message. So number two is completeness. Yes, whenever we have the pertinent details, the needed details, remember I showed to you there the inverted pyramid, then we are referring to the completeness. That's the seven seeder. Okay, number three, we have it is expressed in the least possible number of words and straight to the point. So the correct answer is you got it correct. Correct. It begins again with letter C, of course, because we're under the seven C's of effective communication. So that is conciseness. Okay. So it's being concise. So least number of words. So as much as possible, be straight to the point. And remember, I mentioned there the example dealing with a Q&A portion in a pageant. Okay. The number four, it implies good choice of words and language and a consideration of the audience perspectives and feelings on the part of the sender. So that's number four. That is courtesy, yes. So whenever we deal with the feelings in the part on the part of the sender and of the receiver, then of course we are talking about courtesy. Then the last one is it is backed up by facts, figures, and real life examples or situations. Of course, the concreteness. Wherein you should always present real life scenario or as much as possible, just like in your research presentation, you must have the product of your research so that the panelists or the research teachers will be convinced of your research because you have their concrete evidence. Okay, so that would be all for activity two. For activity number three, under what's more, the directions, think of another helpful expression for each of the following expressions below to avoid communication breakdown. So you will not be writing your answer here or you will be saying aloud your answers, but go on, check your Google Classroom and look for the Google Form link for you will be answering or dealing with it in the Google Form. Okay? Let's continue. What I have learned, directions, complete the diagram on how to avoid communication breakdown. So we have here strategies on how to avoid communication breakdown. So we need to complete the following boxes. So first, we have strategies on how to avoid communication breakdown, the seven C's of effective communication, and helpful expressions to avoid communication breakdown. So let's have first the strategies on how to avoid communication breakdown. So you join me on enumerating them. First is what? Have clarity of thoughts before speaking. Second, learn to listen. Third, take care of your body language and tone. Fourth, build up your confidence by asking for feedback and observing others. And the last one, we have communicate face to face on the important issues. Then another set of strategies that we can use to avoid communication breakdown, we have the keep focus, speak intelligibly, listen with with your ears and eyes, minimize distractions, and do not jump to conclusions. Now let's have the seven C's of effective communication. The first C is completeness, followed by conciseness, consideration, concreteness. Then we have courtesy and clearness, also correctness. So those are the seven C's of effective communication: completeness, conciseness, consideration, concreteness, courtesy, clearness, and correctness. And how about the helpful expressions to avoid communication breakdown? We have the really, uh-huh. Anyway, tell me more. Sounds good. I see what you mean. Can you please repeat what you said? What did you say again? What did you mean when you say that? So, are you saying that? Or so, what is your understanding of this? So, those are the answers for what I have learned activity. Let us have what I can do. Conduct an interview either online or offline with five senior high school students about their experience on communication breakdowns. Summarize their experiences and decide the most appropriate strategy to avoid each communication breakdown. Explain your reason for each strategy. So, number one, so the experience again, about their experience of communication breakdown. So the experience of not understanding the instructions given by the teacher because of the wordy instructions. So the strategy to avoid communication breakdown is for what? Is for the teacher to make the instructions concise. Is it? Okay. Another example here would be when given errands by the parents. Yes, the student was not able to understand it because the siblings are too noisy. Okay? Then the strategy to avoid communication breakdown is to minimize distraction. Do not assassinate the siblings, but instead ask the mother to tell it in the more quiet area of the house so that the instructions will be clearly understood. Okay. Another example of it would be what? Listening to the lecture video. So maybe what? Maybe it can't be understood because of the soft voice of the teacher. So the strategy to avoid communication breakdown there is for the senior high school student or for the student to look for a speaker. Yes. so that the volume will be amplified and it can be heard that good. Or communicate it to the subject teacher that maybe next time make the voice that loud so that it will be understood. Okay, so there are so many experiences that people have encountered that that really made them experience these so-called communication breakdowns. But since we already know the strategies on how to avoid them, then surely in the coming days we can limit ourselves on experiencing communication breakdown. Because again, the very essence of this lesson is for people to eliminate or to lessen experiences when it comes to communication breakdown by applying whatever learning they have gotten from this discussion or from this lesson. Okay, dealing with strategies on avoiding communication breakdown. Let us now have the last activity for this week's lesson. We have the additional activity wherein the directions say, write your own 5 tips on how to avoid communication breakdown. Include a brief explanation for each tip. Okay, so we have here the rubric for the tips, for the 5 tips that you will be presenting. So the criteria, content, mechanics, organization. So the total points will be 15 points. So of course, you have the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent, very good, good, poor, and needs improvement. So again, you think of 5 tips on how to avoid communication breakdown. Then you include a brief explanation for each tip. And of course, relate it to the strategies that we studied. Okay, let's continue and good luck. You deal with this activity in your Google Classroom. Look for again the Google Form link. So thank you. Thank you. I do hope that you have learned a lot. Good day and God bless us all.